do some post-exploitation. I have some open sessions. I have Meterpreter on XP as system, so we use that MSO8067. I have just a regular admin user on Win7, and on the Ubuntu I have that SSH, so I am the user Georgia, which is a sudoer, but I don't have Georgia's password, so I can't sudo, but I am logged in. Alright, so let's just jump into one of those sessions. I'll just jump into the XP. If I do help, we can see our Metasploit Meterpreter commands. So we've seen like hash dump previously. We can like take a picture, turn on webcams, record audio, things like that. And also have like upload and download, so we can upload like user share windows-binaries and netcat.exe. We can put it on the C drive. What do you mean? No such file or directory. Oh, it's Windows dash binaries. There we go. Likewise, you can download. So we'll see some more options of how we can do file transfer, probably in the next video in this section. So we've seen TFTP, we've seen netcat, but we have a couple other options for file transfer when we don't have an interactive shell, but Meterpreter does really easy upload and download, pulling files to and from the system. We also have Meterpreter scripts. So I've heard that Meterpreter scripts are supposed to be phased out and everything's supposed to turn into a post-exploitation module, but you know, there's still Meterpreter scripts right now, so I might as well just use them. I don't know if I'm getting accurate information, so I don't know if it's true or not. So if we go to Meterpreter scripts, these are just Ruby scripts that can be run in a Meterpreter session. For instance, we can run, so we just say run and then the script name, get GUI. Would give us help options if necessary. So we can do -E to enable only. We already have a username and password. I ran this when I recorded the video the first time, so it's obviously not going to work. It's already set. But it creates a cleanup script, so we didn't see RC files in this class, I don't think, but they're just basically scripts for Metasploit, no special syntax required, it's just one command per line. Alright, so I encourage you to spend time trying out the different scripts, different commands. I'll just give you examples here. Now let's look at post-exploitation modules. So that's what the Meterpreter scripts are apparently going to turn into. So you can run the post-exploitation module directly from an open session like that, but I prefer to do them this way. So post, and let's see, what example do I want to use? How about Windows gather. Oops. What's that doing there? Enum logged on users. So if we show our options here, my session again is set from when I did this previously, so I'm going to set session to 4, so do it against my Windows 7 system. And these don't have payloads, they just need to be told the active session you want to run it against. So no rhost, lhost, anything like that. So our current logged in user is me. We have some other users who have come in as well. Looks like administrator, Georgia 2, Martin, things like that. So we have had some previous users log in, but currently it's just me. That's an example of a post-exploitation module, so kind of like auxiliaries, except it's run on an open session. We also have local exploits that it will work on a current session. So we can actually see that next. And take a look at privilege escalation. So if we go to sessions and start with session 1, if we do get UID on it, well, I already migrated because the session was open. That should say system, but if we do we can just do PS and move into another process outside of our server for system where we did our MSO 8067. We saw this in our client sides, so we can move into another one and become regular user Georgia. Georgia is a local admin though, so she'll have some privileges. So we can do simply get system, and on XP that should be pretty simple to do. So we can become system, so it just runs local privilege escalation techniques. So just like our client-side attacks or even our network-based attacks, there can be some vulnerability locally on our Windows or Linux systems. There's also, like I said, local exploits. So it's going to be exploits and then Windows and then local. And one that we could try is, so certainly our Git system doesn't have every possible local privilege escalation exploit, so we can try additional ones. Probably already set my options here. Indeed I did. So you want to set session. Again, just set session to 1. Say exploit. So what's interesting about these, oh, it's already running a system. Yeah, that would stop it. You need to move back to being Georgia. What's interesting about these is that rather than taking the open session and escalating it to system the way Git system does, they'll actually run a payload, and you can actually see one set here from where I already ran this one when I made the video without sound. And they'll create a new session as system, so you'll still have your original session, so that can be a little bit confusing because Git system just escalates the one that you have. But if I go into my Windows 7, do a get UID, I'm me. If I do a get system, it actually isn't going to work. And that's because of something called UAC. It certainly is possible that they could be patched and have the local settings set to the point that you can't privilege escalate, but typically that's not going to be the case, right? I mean, if you got this far on a system, chances are there are some vulnerabilities lying around. So with Windows 7 and all of our other newer Windows operating systems, you've probably seen UAC. It comes up and says, do you want to allow this program to make changes? And you have to run things as administrator, even though you're an administrative user. Like if you want to set up or start up the command line and you want to run privileged things, you have to right click and do run as administrator, which was not the case on XP. So it makes it a little bit harder to do things like this. Naturally, hackers came up with ways to stop this, so there is a module for bypassing UAC. Those exploit Windows local bypass UAC. Again, it does run a payload, and we need to set the session. So I already set it to 4, so I would do set session 4, and you can set up a payload or let it default. But you need to be a local admin for this to work. Since I already did this once, it may actually not work. It's odd. Worked before. I just shot this. Alright, I guess it doesn't want to do it twice. That's fabulous. I don't have the antivirus on. You do have to essentially have the antivirus off for some of this stuff to work. But it definitely worked when I did it a second ago. So what you can do is run this bypass UAC. It will open a new session, so interact with that new session. You're still going to be the regular user, but then if you do a get system, it will work because we've bypassed UAC, so it'll no longer block it. So you should be able to get system. Alright, so we're going to try something a little bit different on our Ubuntu system. So we are the user Georgia, who is a sudoer, but we don't have our password to do our sudoing. So we're going to take a look at using a public exploit from exploit database. So we do have exploit database locally on our Kali system in user share exploit DB. So we can use wget to pull things down if we just put them on our web server. So on Linux, it's really easy to do our file transfer. So we can get some information about this guy. So we can do lsb_release, spell release like that, -a. So this is Ubuntu 8.10 Intrepid. So it is a bit out of date. Newer ones also have vulnerabilities, like in some classes I use 11.10, it has vulnerability as well. I generally keep up with these because I do Android exploitation, so a lot of the same ones that come up in Android come up in Linux proper, since it is still Linux kernel with some changes, so it's a fork. So the one we're going to do here came up in Android as well as the one in 11.10. So we can also get information about the kernel. So if we do some searching, this version of Ubuntu does have a vulnerability in the udev module. That's not how you write that. I always have to look this up. It's like something about udev. This is very specific, so let's see what you did. How about okay, apparently I'm insane. ADM. That was close. Alright, so it's not -v either, it's --version. So udev admin tells us that the version of udev is 124, and anything then just died. That's odd. And anything that is 140 or earlier, I believe, does have an issue. It is a logic issue, so it's not memory corruption, which makes it nice for working with the exploit. So we don't have to worry about switching out shellcode or anything like that. We're actually going to do this one that's C right here. So we can cat platforms, Linux, local 8572.c. So there is no shellcode. Basically it's creating a netlink message and sending it. So it explains up here. Another reason I like this example is it does explain how to use it and what's going on. So it says udev before 1.4.1 does not verify whether a netlink message originates from kernel space, which allows local users to gain privileges by sending a netlink message from user space. So what that means basically is, well, udev, it basically loads device drivers. Like for instance, when you plug in a USB, it will load up the drivers for that, and they will run as root. So that's udev's job, basically. So before 1.4.1 on Android and on Linux proper, well, it didn't have udev, but the init process worked the same way on Android. Basically, it allows, if you send it the correct kind of message, which you can look up the specs and figure out how to send the correct kind of message, even if you're not the from kernel space, you can send it this message and it will gladly run as root whatever code you tell it to, as though it was your device driver. So that's exactly what this exploit does, is creates the correct kind of message and sends it and says, run this for me. It says it's tested on Intrepid, so that's what we have. And usage, it says pass the PID of the udevd netlink socket, which is listed in procnet netlink, and usually is the udevd PID -1 as argv1, which in C, that's our first command line argument. So we need to find some information to pass to it. And it says the exploit will execute temp run as root, so throw whatever payload you want in there. So a lot of your local privilege escalations will basically just take over the current process and just execute bin bash, and you'll be running as root. In this case, just because this is a logic flaw of the particular kind that it is, that it's just going to run code on your behalf as though it's a device driver, we're going to have to be a little bit more creative about it. My solution certainly isn't the only one, but it works, so you're welcome to try something else. You just have to put something in temp run, which we should have access to. Everybody should have access to temp. Alright, so first things first, we need to find that PID of udevd netlink socket. It says it's listed in procnet netlink. Hopefully we have read access to. We do. Here's the PIDs. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like there's 4 of them. I'm not sure which one is this udevd netlink socket. Maybe I could try and figure out what these SK things are and figure it out, but I don't know enough about Linux kernels to be able to tell you. But it gives me another hint. It's usually the udevd PID -1. Well, I know how to find a process ID. psaux grep udevd. So I get my grep itself, and here's sbin udevd -- daemon. 2512 is its process ID. Here's 2511. Says it's usually the PID of udevd -1, so this is 12, this is 11. 2511 looks right to me. We also need to put something in that temp run, so that's going to be our payload. Again, since I already just recorded this, if I look what I put there, this is going to be executed in our bash shell, so we need our hashbang bin bash to tell it these are bash commands. And then I just do a netcat IP address of Kali, which these did change. I tried really hard to keep them the same IPs throughout the entire class, which as much as I travel has not been easy, but I finally failed. So 2222 is a port and execute bin bash. So we saw this same sort of thing in our Linux intro section. It's just going to be our payload. So naturally we need to catch it over here. So we're going to listen on Kali on 2222. So we need to do a wget. So, well, we need to copy it over. I already did, so, but let's just kill it. So I'm going to copy this file to var www. Make sure our web server is running. And turn this back on. So we'll wget .8572.c. So wget makes it easy. It was already on there, so it made it a .1. We do typically have GCC for compiling C files on Linux, which is also nice. We have GCC 8572.c -o for output. Call it exploit, and we created our temp run, so it's hard coded to run that for us, and we need that 2511 as our argument. So it looks like we got a connection over here, though we don't have a prompt. If I do a who am I, I'm root. Cat out Etsy shadow. We got password hashes, but we saw those in password cracking already. That's just a little intro to local privilege escalation and using public exploits. Again, I encourage you to spend the time to read any public exploit, replace anything like shellcode that you can't read, because you never really know otherwise. It doesn't really have the same oversight that we have on some of our others, like Metasploit.